Welcome to the Euro Express with me, your host, Kevin Turley. On this show, we climb aboard the Euro Express to visit different European locations where we talk to people living there about their lives and their faith. It's as if we're hurtling through Europe in the dining compartment of the Orient Express with good food and even better conversation. So, all aboard the Euro Express. Hello and welcome to the Euro Express. This week we head to the Netherlands where we're picking up two very special passengers. Fr Elias Leyds, who's a frequent commuter on this line and a very close collaborator. So, Bas, tell us who you are and where exactly in Holland you are.
Thank you, Kevin. My name is Bas Kloppenborg. I'm in Zwichelte, little village in the north of Holland, south of Groningen.
Now, I described you as a collaborator of Fr Elias, so we better explain what it is you're working on together.
I think Elias can explain it much better than I can, but I'm just helping him out. I'm a former study friend of him from Delft University, and they basically asked me to help him out to set up EWTN in the Low Countries.
I would say it's the other way around. I mean, since I came back to Holland 11 years ago, he told me all the time, you must do something, but you decide what, and I will help you. And after 11 years, I got so bored with it that I told him I do have something. We must start EWTN in the Netherlands, in the Low Countries. So that's why we're here.
So, first of all, for our viewers who may not know what the Low Countries consist of, can one of you explain to us geographically where you are?
I'd say it's the northern part of the middle part of the great empire of Charlemagne, Charles the Great. Yes. It was split up, so there was a middle part. We say Lotharingen. I don't know how the English call it, but the French, of course, abbreviate, they say Lorraine. It's too difficult for them to pronounce normally Lotharingen. But we are sort of the most northern part of that. And because of its geographical position, it was always very decentralized. It was one of the first parts of Europe after the fall of the Roman Empire that cities started to form. Of course, everything had to do with trade. And that collection of countries near the sea in the northern part of that empire on the European continent was called the Netherlands, for obvious reasons, because it's quite low. And so although now today the name is restricted to the northern part of the original Netherlands, which we call the Netherlands or Holland, there is really a cultural heritage which is shared by the three countries, Luxembourg, Belgium, Holland, and in fact also the extreme north of France. And the shared history has everything to do with Christianity. And we want to base EWTN Low Countries on that. Which means actually that we will have to speak three languages. We're starting with Dutch, then we'll go to French, and of course, a little bit of German too is spoken in Belgium. And finally, we have to also speak the language of the competitor, so we speak English too.
What about Flemish? Don't you? Or is Flemish and Dutch essentially the same thing?
It's very much the same thing. Of course, there's a whole myriad of local accents which vary enormously between the north, south, west, east of the Netherlands, but basically it's the same language. So,
Bas, how did Fr Elias explain to you this very ambitious project? Can you remember the moment that he suggested EWTN to you?
Yes. You know, Fr Elias used to be director of Radio Maria.
Yes.
And Radio Maria is a small group in Holland. And the first time he said it to us, to me and basically the other collaborator with this Vincent van Hal, we said, oh no, don't start with that, because Holland, it's like if you start with that, it's not going to work. That's the first reaction. And then basically we kept talking about it. He was enthusiastic, and we thought, well, why not? And basically only after I visited with him about 3/4 of a year ago, Irondale, then for me the money really dropped, because then I thought, yes, this is going to work. But it's a hard challenge, I think, in Holland.
Now, you both visited Arendelle, and I haven't had the privilege of going there, but I've obviously seen much footage of it. It's a proper American media stroke television center. You know, it's a very professional operation. Can I ask, when you went there, were you slightly awed by it? Did you think, well, how can we replicate this in the Low Countries?
Yeah, I think, yes, of course, it's very professional. But what I like there, that's a sort of like a campus ID. So you walk on, basically, it's a studio, it's very professional, a beautiful mass, a beautiful chapel. Yeah. There is a monastery, and you walk around, and on the street, basically, you know, everybody is working for the same family or the same team. And it creates very much like a feeling of a little village, and that's what I really like. And the monastery is beautiful, and the mass is absolutely fantastic. And therefore, there was a special atmosphere that I thought, that's a campus, sort of a religious campus, I would like to have in Holland as well. But anyway, that's an idea I had. I'm not sure what Elias, father, what did you think when you?
Well, it was of course a surprise. It was a surprise. If you look at the center of broadcasting in Holland, which is near a town called Hilversum, that is gigantic. It's luxurious, it's full of money, it's enormous. Of course, it's the state. And I was expecting something like that from a worldwide network based in Irondale. I was expecting something similar, because in fact they reach many more people than the Dutch broadcasting does. And I was expecting a kind of, not a Trump tower, but a Mother Angelica tower. And it turned out to be very down to earth, a campus, but very modest, with a very, with people that work like a family. Of course, they work hard, they're enthusiastic, but it had a really nice, I would say, Catholic family spirit. So I was surprised. And although, of course, the whole technology is always very intimidating with all these computers and little lights flashing. But on the other hand, I feel very, very much at ease, because they're doing their job, and it's not the job that is expected of me. And I think we can do that. If we can keep the same modesty and the same spirit of prayer, of being useless servants in the hands of God, guided by Our Lady, I think it's going to work. So,
Alabama, United States, there's a very different culture to that in Europe in general. I mean, it's a much more traditional to our eyes, much more religious, much more Christian in some sense, at least overtly. Whereas if I was to think of modern day, the Netherlands in particular, though also Belgium to some extent, I think of a very, very secular state. And I think of an almost aggressively secular state. And a lot of people outside of the Netherlands really don't even realize how Catholic the Netherlands was, how Catholic the Netherlands continued even after the Reformation to some extent. It's a little bit of a tall order for those involved in this project to bring something so Catholic, yet so American in a sense, or at least in its form, to a very European state which is very secular to its bone, or that's how it appears. Is that a fair estimation of the challenge ahead?
Kevin, absolutely right. I mean, that's the reason why the very first reaction for myself was, don't start it here in Holland, because it's not going to work. So you really need something special, and I don't know yet what the miracle will be, because it's still a hard, tall order. But if you speak to people in Holland, I mean, it's almost irrelevant, the church. So it's almost like you have to make it again, give it a new flash, almost to say, and yeah, it is a tall order. But at the same time, when you speak to people now, the small first videos we made, I mean, there's some light, I think, and people see. I mean, look at Fr Elias, but that initially saying, well, he's an extreme sort of it's somebody we don't know him. What's he doing? But then when you start to meet him and you have to encounter, then it starts to work. So it's just, yeah, I'm not sure how to describe it.
Bas. Mind your words.
But it's a tall order. It is a desert, and still, if you offer a little bit of water in the desert, then they suddenly say, "Hey, that's not bad, perhaps." But it goes very slow. Even the bishops are. They think, "Oh, you're too Catholic. You're perhaps too polarizing. Come on." And I say, "Hey, come on, guys." But we also have to guide them a little bit. That's not too bad to show that you're Catholic, but. Of course, that's Holland.
Father Elias,
I'm not sure whether I make myself clear.
No, you do. Father Elias, I just wonder if, knowing you a little bit and having the privilege of having met you when you visited England, I sense a man who relishes a challenge, and you really have one over there.
I think I have, yeah. And I do cherish a challenge, but I'd say indifference is very... discouraging, but there's also very strong, I would say, in our culture, despite what everyone says, very strong conformism. It's a very conformist culture, because of course we had a lot of divisions, religious divisions in the past, but very, very quickly the formula was to tolerate each other. That means we all behave a little bit in the same manner. Behind closed doors, we do what we want. And you must not forget that at the same time that we had our golden age, expansion of trade, discovering the world, half of the male population of Amsterdam sailing off to new colonies and new discoveries. At that same time that we were boasting about our freedom, the first republic in Holland, actually on theological level, we abolished the free will, because the let's say the spiritual revolution that pushed this was the very strict form of Calvinism, and I would even say the Dutch thought that Calvin was not Calvinist enough, so we sort of aggravated the definition of predestination. So it's a very strange paradox in our country that on a practical level, we wanted to be free from all restrictions and all laws and all intolerance, whereas on our spiritual level, at level of our faith, we abolished the free will. And this paradox has always been in our society. I would say that when you look at the spiritual sort of directions that the cultural, that determine the Dutch culture. I'm sorry, but I can, about the metaphor, but I would compare it to a boxing match. In the blue corner, it's the liberals, who in fact are so obsessed with their freedom that it's not important what you choose, what you do, what you believe, as long as you can claim to be free. That's the blue corner. And in the red corner, it's the conservatives or the orthodox Calvinists that don't want to talk about the free will of human beings, but about the very harsh, horrible decisions that God has taken in eternity, and you better obey. And that's the red corner. In the middle, there's the referee, and he's a poor little man because he's the Catholic and he takes all the punches. And I think that's exactly what's happening today. And the thing is, the Catholics who have been tolerated as second-class citizens are so weary that they just don't want to get the punches anymore. And as long as you don't take risks and you are conformed to everything that is demanded of you, you're fine. And of course, there were lots of guys and girls that wanted to bite into something when the Catholic Church was allowed to live and be open and be public 150 years ago. But I would say the best, they went into the mission to Africa, South America. And so there is no tradition of martyrdom in our church. There's no tradition of really being courageous, courageously evangelizing your own territory. There's no tradition of that. And we're paying the price of the tolerance today. That's how I would describe it.
Father Elias, could you give just a very, very brief outline of the history of Holland, the Netherlands, since the Reformation? I mean, how did the Reformation take root in your part of the world?
Well, I would say there's always a political background, and the political background is that the Spanish Empire was breaking down. There was a very Catholic king who wanted actually to preserve the faith, but he couldn't afford it anymore. And this decentralized part of his kingdom didn't want to have any of that. So the emancipation of the bourgeois in the small towns, it made the revolution. In the same way that the Lutherans actually were an emancipation of the sort of second highest aristocracy. It was really like an aristocratic revolution. Calvinism, which is sense of certainty, security. It's very much a bourgeois revolution. So we had a golden century in which the Dutch were both very strongly expanding and also a little bit the bad boy of Europe. After that, it slowly declined, and the English took over sort of the empire of the sea. And in the end, it's the Americans who took it over. The Dutch was an empire based on wind, the English on coal, and the Americans on oil. I would say that's the history of our country. And since what we call the Golden Age, not much has happened where you would say we were really at the center of something in the world. We were following other empires, other cultures. Indonesia was part of our empire, but it's more because we wanted to copy the English that we had Indonesia.
Would you say it's too much of a stretch, Father Elias and Bas, to suggest that the kind of capitalism we live today across the world had its roots in the kind of Dutch Reformation, the Dutch East India Company, the way in which the mercantile class, the seagoing Dutch sort of began that sort of trading?
Absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. It's very much linked with nominalism, which is a bit too much a philosophical question. It's too much to go into now. But I would say what we see today is like the expansion of a triangle. It started in Holland. It sort of took over Anglican England, and then it went to America. You see those three phases. Even you look at the value of the currency, the Dutch currency, the English pound, and the American dollar, the devaluation, which shows certain decline. That's exactly what happened.
So we have a country which is built on Calvinism as the established church, on capitalism as the preferred modus operandi, with some nod to colonialism. That's three C's I've been able to work in there together. But you're coming with an E, a W, and a T, and an N to a very post-Christian, a modicum of Catholicism still embedded in that culture. I'm talking about the Netherlands here, not Belgium, obviously. I'm still struggling a bit to see how you're going to make a real dent in that. Is that my lack of faith?
No doubt.
It wouldn't be the first time.
Well, I think, the Russians, they say, if you don't take risks, if you don't like taking risk, you'll never drink champagne. And so we're going to try it. I mean, if you don't shoot, you'll always miss. So,
of course.
There have been surprising reappearances of the Catholic faith. When the Vatican was threatened by the troops of Garibaldi, a French general, I forgot his name, he formed an army of volunteers to defend the Vatican. So there was 3,000 Frenchmen, and to his great surprise, there were 2,000 or 1,000 Belgians, but to his greatest surprise, there were 2,000 Dutchmen who just appeared from nowhere.
Incredible.
And, yeah, and it's because of them. I mean, also because of them that the Vatican was saved. So we're in for surprises. We are strange people. I think so.
Well, Father Elias, you've been to the British headquarters for EWTN here in Walsingham, which is surprising in itself because if you think of Great Britain, you think of London as the capital of media, political capital, world capital, etc., etc., and the natural home to situate a media operation. Whereas we are a studio really in a small village in the periphery of England, a good almost an hour from the nearest train station. The roads are nowhere near motorways, etc. And yet this is sort of where we've ended up. And I just wonder, Bas, the place you mentioned at the start of this program as a kind of Marian shrine, I think you said in Holland?
You mean the place, Walsingham, you mean, or in Holland?
No, your place, where near where you are.
No, I'm in Zwichelte. Zwichelte is a very little village, perhaps even smaller than Walsingham, but that's in the north. I mean, I lived in Nigeria, and in Nigeria, they basically, after the British gave it back to the Nigerians, and they decided, well, we need a capital. And in the capital, Abuja, is effectively, if you take the whole country, they draw lines and said, where's the middle? And there they built a new capital.
That's right.
Now, if you now, I looked at that this morning accidentally, but if you take the center of Holland itself, you would get somewhere, in the same principle as Nigeria, Abuja, you would come somewhere in the Southern Sea, the Zuiderzee, which now proclaimed land. So then they moved a little bit to the south and came to Utrecht. And Utrecht, which is now the Archbishop's capital, where the Cardinal is living, that's the center of Holland. But if you take now the real center of Benelux, of Belgium, Holland, and Luxembourg, you go a little bit more south. And it happens to be around the area of Geldermalsen, where exactly Elias is now living. So it happens to be, like Mother Angelica always said, it's a little bit perhaps fate or providence that we needed to be there. So it's a good sign. But if you now think about what is the place Geldermalsen, it's the Bible Belt. A lot of Reformed people there. There are 12 Protestant churches and only one little Catholic church. That's where Fr Elias is there. So somehow I think there is, you need to be brave to do it, but there are signs that we should be here.
Father Elias, are you conscious of that maybe God has placed you in this rather interesting dot in the middle of the Benelux that could be a great sort of center point for the evangelization through media?
I wouldn't be surprised. I hope we can stay here. The connections are excellent. I'm near public transport, the roads. It's very practical to be here. I don't know what God will give to us to help EWTN, but it's a good place. It's a bit like Irondale. It's in the middle of nowhere, but in fact, when you look at it, it's a very central place. This is the oldest cultivated region of Holland.
Yes. But it's interesting you say it's a place in the middle of nowhere because this seems to be a running theme. Irondale, Alabama, middle of nowhere. You could say middle of nowhere in terms of the United States, in terms of its media. Walsingham, the same thing.
I have to correct you, Kevin, because Walsingham, of course, it's not just in the middle of nowhere. It is a very important Marian shrine. So correct. You could also say that London is in the middle of nowhere. I think that's what I miss. There's no pilgrimage place here. There's no memory of a very holy place. Only the very, very distant past that the Romans came here and started to cultivate the lands. But then maybe we have to change it into a holy place.
Well, that's correct, and I guess I think I was when I said middle of nowhere, I was leading to the idea that there's a very good biblical precedent for this when people talk about Nazareth or they talk about Galilee. You know, it's kind of like it's away from the mainstream, and maybe that's God's way of. Maybe it's a good sign, I guess, is what I'm saying.
We have to sanctify the land again. We have
Correct.
to sanctify.
Correct. So explain to me a little bit about how media works in the Netherlands. Do you have cable? Do you have satellite? Do you have national broadcasters? What's the terrain look like that you're entering into?
Well, Bas, you tell.
Yes. Holland is a very densely sort of, there's everywhere there's cable, internet, there's everywhere. There's not much satellite television. People use it to be really independent, and you have some of the reformed people who want to have a satellite to be really independent, but there's a lot basically on the internet, and I think that's also the future, that everything will go on the internet. It's very densely cabled country.
So when you say cabled, Bas, are you saying that people watch their television providers through the internet? Is that the way things have gone in the Netherlands?
At the moment, that is where it has moved to. But
yes.
Basically, it's so you can reach everybody by internet, basically. Right. So even the normal television, you used to have television cables, but that's all is now over the internet. So you even have telephone over the internet, although it's just a, yeah.
So you don't have sort of analog signals moving around. You don't have this sort of transmitters and stuff. It's all via Wi-Fi. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's Wi-Fi, and you have also 5G coming through as well. But it's everything is reachable, basically. I mean, even a country house very far. I mean, I live here in a village, and the farmers, we have now glass fiber. It's very densely cabled country where you have high speeds and can do anything. So that's basically the future. That's the reason why the traditional television, satellite dish, cars, we don't really need that. We can do it via the internet.
That's really good in terms of opportunity. But do you have a state broadcaster? Is it quite sort of? Does the government interfere in who can broadcast where and when?
Yeah, well, it's a complicated system because we used to have companies that that received government money in a proportionate way to the membership. So you could become a member of such a broadcasting company, and you would pay something, and the state would really pay the major part of it. So they would measure that. And so you had the Catholics had their television station, the Protestants, the strict Protestants, the less strict Protestants. We had some very funny anarchist Protestants who actually are now the final, really, I would say, decent sort of intellectual broadcasting company. All the others, they have sort of lost their identity. People are no longer a member. So the system is very slowly disintegrating. And the state, of course, would like to change everything to commercial television because that doesn't cost them any money anymore. But it is a very strange system where you got companies where you become a member and they get more subsidy if they have more members.
So that's really interesting and very different from the way it is in the UK. So the idea of having subscriptions to a preferred network provider is the normal traditional way of receiving your television in the Netherlands.
Yes, so it is disintegrating because I think the average age of people watching television is now 70 something. Youth doesn't watch television anymore, but they still receive milliards of euros.
Yeah, so but what I'm suggesting is in setting up EWTN as a subscription channel, as a channel you help through donations or whichever way it is not so unusual. It's just like everybody else, is what you're saying.
It is unusual because we don't go for the subsidy. We want to be completely independent. And we are one of the many, that's true, channels now opening up on YouTube. So it's going to be hard to break into the market.
Can I ask Bas? Because we talked about the culture of the Netherlands and being so secular and the Catholicism there so watered down for so many generations. But you must also sense in the Netherlands, in the Low Countries, that you're also part of another phenomena. There may be this phenomena which is the increasing and rapid secularization of Europe, but there's also this kind of spread of Catholic media across Europe, from Ireland all the way to the Ukraine, and you're part of that movement. Do you sense that you are part of that?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, the great thing is I mean, the Catholic Church, I think, is a universal church, and that's what you also feel when you speak to all the different EWTN entities. And I mean, I get a lot of support. I mean, we had to set up the website. It was sort of Poland which helped us out. We're now talking to basically the Philippines to help us with developing an app. So yes, all the people are thinking the same. I mean, think about the programs they are made in the excellent documentaries which are made in the Vatican Bureau. I mean, we want to translate it, and it's very easy just to phone the people there and say, hey, give us a copy, we're going to translate it, and it's given. It's only a matter of streamlining that process. And then I think, I mean, that's our big challenge. I mean, what happened in Holland is that you see there are definitely a number of very good priests, but funny enough, they have left Holland because they said it's too secular here, it's difficult, and they went going to south of France, to Vienna, to all sort of places. And I think it's also for us to keep track of them, to bring them back later on. So basically make documentaries about them and see what they are doing outside there. Also, let them see what's still happening in Holland, which is great in Holland, and then try to connect it. And that making connections in EWTN, which we now do in the conference, which works almost as as the speed of light at the moment, connecting with people. I mean, we can do that as well with great Catholic Dutch people who left Holland in order to bring them back. Now, so there's a lot to do. We only have to connect the dots, I think.
There's an element which I see in most of the people working in EWTN across the globe, is this idea of a sense of calling, a sense of mission, something almost quasi-religious or mysterious even. I know Fr Elias, I've talked to a little bit about this, but Bas, do you sense that as well? That this is a gift that you've been given, a precious gift?
Yes, in a way. I do this because I think it needs to be done, and it came on my path, and we just have to make it work. It is work, but I'm not getting paid for it. So it's just something like I do it because I like doing it, and it needs to be done, and definitely in Holland. So is that a vocation? Yeah, perhaps that's what you call a vocation. I don't know. I just do it. It came on my path, and I think it's a good thing to do.
What about you, Fr Elias? Do you see, I mean, you're obviously a vocation as a priest and a religious, but is this a vocation within a vocation, another aspect of your vocation ultimately of baptism?
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, it's God gives us, but we give ourselves to God also. And we are like a keyboard, but God plays the melody, and we'll see what happens. It's been great, and of course you get confirmations, although sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to because, I've spent a lot of time abroad from, about 13 years as a brother, and that was great to be abroad, learn new things, meet people from other cultures. And I came back 10 years ago and didn't know why the hell I had to come back. And things are taking shape a little bit. And that's beautiful to see. That's beautiful to see. And, Bas is from, I would say, traditionally Catholic offspring. He's one of those very few families in which the faith has really survived. Congratulations to his parents. But I'm not at all from that tradition. I'm from a free-thinking Protestant tradition. So I've always had the idea I feel very much a real Dutchman. And I feel a real Catholic. But don't call me a Dutch Catholic, because the two things seem to be so completely contradictory. But bit by bit, there is a little bit of clarity, and I remember the Zouaves, these volunteers that went to Rome.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the missionaries, and it's strange, but I feel times are changing. We've been living in a very comfortable paradigm where the press could do whatever they wanted with the people. And for me, a sign of hope is a certain degree of anarchy that is mounting, where people no longer take for granted what the press says. Now, there's always a few people who get drowned, who drown themselves a little bit in conspiracy theories. But on the other hand, there is a large majority of very decent, realistic, hardworking Dutch people that now dare to ask questions. And for me, that's a sign of hope. You meet them, I would say mostly outside the church, but many people see that something is wrong. And I think we live in the end game, if you like, of the Enlightenment. And in fact, not just the Enlightenment, I mentioned it before, but we are also living the end game of nominalism. Nominalism, in fact, is the philosophy that says that there is no objective truth, and we have to sort of we have names that we can agree upon, but the meaning cannot be really attained. We live in a time where everything seems to lose meaning. And that's so much against nature that nature is fighting back. Now, it might be quite how do you say that? It's a very chaotic way of fighting back. But for me, that mounting chaos is a sign that something is going to change. And that we can, if we are realistic, very down to earth, we can give back the word of God to the people.
Whenever I speak to you, Father Elias, whenever I meet you, and I hope you're not offended by me saying this, but I always sense an element of the apocalypse about you. I sort of zeroing in on the end times, not necessarily going around predicting end times or any such, but there's something about a sort of quickening of the pace that things are moving, things are changing in Holland, in England, across the world. That and it's not just COVID. We met before that, and I had the same sense. There's this sense of an epoch shift, a movement of history. Is that something you recognize? And if so, I put it to both of you, gentlemen, how does EWTN in Holland then fit to that paradigm?
I think you're right. It might be a little bit harder to offend me, but there is something up. But of course, there's only one thing that we look forward to. There's only one prophecy left, that Jesus is going to come back, and we don't know anything about it, so we shouldn't even worry about that too much, except preparing ourselves. And the only, it's even an apocalyptic term. The only thing that is real prophecy is witness for Christ, not so much in that he is coming back, but where he is now. And from that point of view, the apocalypse is on since Christ left the tomb. The empty tomb of Christ, that's where the apocalypse started. And I think if you look at the symbols of the apocalypse, you see certain patterns, first of all, in our spiritual life, but also in the world around us, that make you feel, I'm not saying at home, but they make you feel at your place wherever you are in the world, even if you're on your own. Even if you're totally alone, the place where you are makes sense, because I see that a lot of the symbolisms of the apocalypse correspond to what we are living today. And actually, that has been an intuition that I had when I went to school in Wales, in Great Britain, and it has never left me since. It was a bit frightening in the beginning because I didn't really know or believe in Christ. when I started having that intuition. But now, of course, as you may have noticed, I believe in Christ. And so yeah, I think we live in a very special time of the apocalypse, because I think also a lot of the divisions that started, I would say, with nominalism, that's the late Middle Ages, we are now seeing what it comes down to. We see sort of the final consequences of everything that started in those days. And that's like all over Europe. When I just look at Britain, what's happening now in Britain, so much can be explained by what happened during the time of Henry VIII.
Yes, absolutely.
And the same thing, less known to you, what is happening today is the consequence of decisions that were taken when the lower countries got their religious wars, their independence wars, and split up into different countries. There's always, when you don't pay the bill, the people after you will have to.
Yes, I mean, saying that though, history throws up strange circumstances and strange trains of events. So, for example, you're right, that the England, Scotland, England and Wales, Ireland, all have been shaped dramatically by the Reformation. But, just talking to you from Walsingham in England, which was a medieval shrine and a great symbol of Catholic England, which was then repressed and suppressed and destroyed at the Reformation, and then lay fallow for 300 years. I mean, nothing happened, and yet today there is very much a living shrine here. We have EWTN here. The friars who used to have the large friary, the ruined friary across the square from us here. They are back in the village. They are ministering to pilgrims just as they did in the medieval times. There's a sort of strange way in which history, yes, it changes and moves, but it mutates in a way that ultimately, to my eyes, and I wonder if you agree with this, maybe Bas, is that somehow you can see the semblance of the end game here, which is the coming of our Lord, but it's a coming in triumph.
Yes, definitely coming in triumph, but also I refuse to be negative. I mean, in Holland, as long as I see little pearls of richness in Holland somewhere and we connect them all, then there's still a sign of hope, and therefore I continue doing it. So although I agree with you that Holland is a desert and Holland is very secular, there's still places in Groningen, in Werfhuizen, in Amsterdam, in Utrecht, you see little places where there are signs still of people holding the fort, so to say.
I think it's even better. First of all, the word secular has no meaning to me. We are still an extremely religious culture. It might not be Christian, but it is religious. Yeah. Holland is one of the major countries as far as rave parties are concerned. I mean, the technology, the music, the inventions, all the sort of artistic aspects of rave parties, these enormous mass concerts. Holland plays a major role in that. And that is the modern form of the old ecstatic religions. It's just pagan religion, but it's not purely atheism or secularism. I mean, it's not true. We are a very religious culture. And I see that all over the world, that wherever Christianity is sort of losing its clarity, the natural religion comes up. And this has sometimes very violent implications, like the gang culture in Middle America is very clearly the old Indian pagan religion coming up from down under, because Christianity is no longer offering a true paternity, fatherhood. Christianity has been a religion that has losing a lot of strength and clarity because of the lack of fatherhood. So you see that in those countries where, let's say, the maternal part is developed and very nice, and the old religion pagan culture comes up. In the gang culture here in the West, because we of course have a Roman Greek past, it's much more the Dionysian ecstatic culture. You could even range gay pride with that. It's the total public ecstasy of your sexual preferences. Although of course there's a political part of it, but I think gay pride is not much a new thing. I mean, the Romans and the Greek had something like that. So first of all, I see the natural religion springing up everywhere where fatherhood of the Christian faith is weakened.
Well, unpack that a little for us, Father Elias, because
I think the Holy Spirit will unpack it. We just have to preach the Logos with clarity.
Okay.
Where there is violence, you say you're sacrificing for nothing. You want to sacrifice, but it makes no sense. Your sacrifice will have a very short result, but in the end you will die yourself too. Try to see where the real sacrifice is, like in Holy Mass, especially let's say the more traditional form of Mass. I'm not talking about exact liturgies, but where the sacrificial aspect of Mass is accentuated, it sort of comforts the heart, because you see, my sacrifice is worthless without the Eucharist, without the sacrifice of Christ. If you see too much partying going on, you can say, restrain yourself a bit, because there's going to be an eternal party, and this one is over, and there's going to be an everlasting party which is so great that you'll never have a hangover. And you don't need chemicals, don't need to take pills to tell yourself that this is a nice party. In my age, the good old age, some of the idiots who were partying too much, they had to take pills in the morning. They felt like heroes. I need a pill to, in Russia, you just take another glass of vodka and there goes the hangover. But today you need pills before the party, because if not, it's not going to be fun. We have to show to people that this party is not real.
But this is this is a message which Christian preachers for 2,000 years have tried to impress upon the audience, that we have no eternal city here, that this is a passing through to the real world, to the eternity. And it has always fallen on well, seemingly, I mean, in the past, maybe there was social pressures to conform to religious groups, whatever the state religion was at the time, but it's never been very popular. And I mean, looking around the world today, we have many crises that we didn't even have 2 years ago that are all coming to the fore. There's so much anger, so much violence, so much polarization in politics, in nations.
Kevin, listen, that message has always fallen on fertile ground if it was clear and if you appealed to people to live something that was worth living and even give your life for. Every time the Benedictines became too rich, there were some irreducible monks that said, let's try again, let's make it tough and austere again, because that's what we are here for. So there has always been a mechanism within Christianity, I call it the Holy Spirit, to make things clear and to make things worthwhile giving something to. The moment that you make Christianity a comfortable emotional cult or a cult of emotion, it comes crashing down. If you only look at beauty, you'll never appeal to the truth. You must, I mean, Mother Teresa, she made her life that she goes to the ugliest places of the world. And even today, I once mentioned a radioactive town in Belarus, to try to scare a sister of Mother Teresa. And the only thing she wanted to know is where it was on the map, When can I go there? Does it have a train station, It was really funny.
Kevin, you now see a little bit how Elias is when he explains things and get enthusiastic and get energetic.
But we are coming, believe it or not, we are hurtling into the train station on the Euro Express. It's been an absolutely riveting hour talking to you both. All I can say is that you have our prayers and whatever support we can give you from Great Britain, but also from across Europe and indeed the United States. in this very, very important task that you're undertaking in the Benelux countries, and we wish you the very, very best with it. And on another level, I do hope that you will return to the Euro Express soon, buy your tickets and get on board for another chat. Father Elias, at the moment, you are the most frequent commuter, as I say, on this route, and I hope that will continue for some time to come.
Yeah, but I think I kept you talking so long, we missed the station where we wanted to get off. So I guess we'll have to spend the night on a bench in a park somewhere.
Right. Very good. Okay. So
Thanks a lot, Kevin.
from Walsingham, good night and thank you very much.